Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to tell you about some really great hidden gem sci-fi movies you can currently catch on Hulu. So this list is going to contain 10 movies that are all science fiction, but they're either lesser known, movies that you've likely not seen, or ones that you definitely forgot about. They're hiding out on Hulu. They're all good watches, and I'll be explaining enough about them to give you an idea as to whether or not they're a good fit for you. This video is sponsored by 80s Tees. Later in the video, I'll be telling you more about their great stuff, but let's go ahead and start with my number 10 pick, Colossal. Now this movie is not about what it's about, and what it's not about is this giant monster tearing apart Seoul, South Korea, and its connection to a woman in America played by Anne Hathaway. That is what it appears to be about, but you know, it's metaphorical and it works really well. This is sort of a nice movie with a little heart. It does have a little bit of a dark edge to it, but it's not overly dark and gloomy. It's not gonna really bring you down, but it does have some heavy themes rolled into it. Alcoholism being one of them. And it's got this weird sci-fi setting where it's just as I described it. There is a giant monster tearing apart Seoul, South Korea. Anne Hathaway is very good in it, but so is Jason Sudeikis. I think he even outshines her here. He's always fun and silly. And here, he is, but he's got a lot more going on under the surface. When you watch it, you'll see what I'm talking about. My next pick is a great little small indie sci-fi flick, and I say small because it's a fairly small story, but there are big things happening in fast color. This one is about specifically a woman and a young girl, but there's other people supposedly that have powers. Now, there are plenty of stories and movies and books where this is the case. And fast color, there's a lot of things that other movies do, but it also does some very different things that I found to be very interesting. And when you consider the fact that it is such a small scale in the story and you don't expect this big, grand, epic adventure, it's really interesting. I think some of the visuals can even take you off guard because you are watching this very low budget indie flick, and then suddenly some wild stuff sort of comes to life on screen with this one. So if you like smaller story indie flicks, this is a great one that has sort of a surprise of a sci-fi thing that just can be kind of dazzling. I think that's the way to watch it, is to sort of expect a little bit less from it, and you'll be surprised at how much you actually get. Now my next pick was, I guess, kind of a blockbuster release. I think it honestly flopped back when it came out about 15 years ago now, but Aeon Flux was based on an anime series, and the movie itself doesn't even have nearly as cool of a visual style as the series had, but it's cool enough and weird enough to let it hold up and continue to be interesting 15 years later. Meaning, it didn't just go by the book, and it didn't just kind of sell Charlize Theron's body in this sexy little sci-fi outfit and some action sequences, which is a lot of what movies tend to do. They'll come out, they can market it well, people go buy tickets, they buy the DVD, and then the movie just gets forgotten about. Aeon Flux has enough weirdness to it where you can watch it today and be like, man, they really did that back then. So they kind of reached for the brass ring on this one a little bit, and I think they just barely missed it. They definitely missed it, but I think they got closer than maybe you realized on the first watch, and certainly closer than I realized, because again, some really sort of bizarre but cool visuals accompany this one in a way that I didn't really appreciate back when it came out. My number 7 pick is from Japan. It's called Tetsuo the Bullet Man. Now, this is sort of a sequel, or I guess a spiritual sequel, to another sort of cult classic movie called Tetsuo. But it does differ, and this is definitely the weirdest one on the list, and the least amount of you should watch, so pay attention. Not only is this one in a foreign language, it is weird and even just sort of gross. There's some weird body horror stuff as this man's body is transforming. Now, all of that sounds cool. Additionally, some of the just music and the editing is really sort of bizarre and experimental. I found it to be really sort of immersive. I really got into this one and was just really in love with how weird it was, but I'm well aware that the style of this movie is really not for everybody. In fact, if you give it a shot and you're not into it in the first few minutes, say 5 minutes, it does get better, but if you're not into it at all, you're not gonna like the style of this one. It's gonna be too much, but for those of you that like super weird stuff, this one's super weird, super metal, and just really surprising. And then we'll round out my bottom 5 picks with the Europa Report. This one sort of leans on the performances and sort of the small scale because it's about a group of astronauts that go to one of the moons of Jupiter, Europa, and they're doing some experiments and weird things start happening. This one's basically like a found footage movie, except most of it's done from the security cameras on the ship. So you feel like you're watching some sort of event unfold. And it's clever. It is slow paced. You're not going to have people running around on this moon or anything like that. It's all in this space station, but the story's delivered very effectively considering the small sort of scope of the set that they're on, or the setting rather. And then the payoff, you do have to wait because it's slow paced, but the payoff is ultimately worth it. That's why I've got it ranked right here in the middle of the list. If you've never seen this one, be prepared for something to unveil itself slowly, but with that expectation out of the way, it's a cool flick. I think you're gonna dig it. If you love movies, then you will love browsing 80stees.com. They have the raddest selection of movie tees, sure to earn you respect from your fellow movie nerds. I personally shop there. I have t-shirts from there like this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So jump in your DeLorean or get to the chopper and get ready to sweep some legs, but don't cross the streams. Whether you're a brain, an athlete, a criminal, a princess, a basket case, you will love shopping at 80stees.com. Use the link in the description below to browse their massive selection, and right now, my viewers can get 30% off their entire order when they use code FLICK30. Again, use the link in the description, browse it. You're gonna find awesome designs for movies that you love. I know you will. I have found a bunch as I showed you, but use the code FLICK30, save 30%. Enjoy that, and let's move on with the rest of the list. Now, my number 5 pick is a space western, but it's not epic. Another one that's a fairly small story, which is what makes it a hidden gem. This one's called Prospect. It's about some people basically mining on an alien planet. They're going after these weird sort of organic root things that have this crystal inside of it, but they're miners. And if you were to take away the fact that they're on a planet, you place them sort of in the American West, mining for gold or something, and you give them a musket instead of this weird space gun thing they have, which looks a lot like a musket, you've got yourself a pretty good Western. The setting that they're in, though, is very interesting. It's just story-wise, this could have easily been adapted into a Western. That's all I'm saying about it. And it's a good way to look at this movie too, because it makes it feel different and it gives it this unique flavor. While some of the shots certainly look very epic, and ultimately the adventure has sort of an epic quality to it, this again is a smaller story. You're following this teenage girl who's just trying to survive in sort of this like frontier. She gets sort of paired up with this grifter type guy played by Pedro Pascal, who is most famous at the moment for being in another space western. He is the man behind the mask in The Mandalorian. He was also in Narcos. He's a fantastic actor, and he does a good job here sort of carrying this movie. And I think the movie ultimately works because of him, but also just some of the visual interest that the space suits have and the planet that they're on. All cool stuff. I dug the movie. I actually paid to watch this one months and months back and did not regret spending a few bucks on it, and you get to watch it included with your Hulu account right now. Host is from the same director as last year's Parasite. Parasite also happens to be on Hulu, but it doesn't fit on this list. Host, though, is a really great monster flick, again, about a giant monster tearing apart South Korea. However, unlike Colossal, you get to see the monster in this one, and you get to see a lot of destruction. There's a lot of action sequences. The type of monster that it is, I found to be very interesting, and it sort of makes the movie work. It's also just really well directed. Some of the action sequences play out really well. You know where everybody is, where the monster is when you're supposed to, or you don't know where it is when you're not supposed to. And so the opening of this movie is really fantastic, but then the story develops as these people are trying to figure out what is going on with this monster. So it's not just a Godzilla type thing where there's action sequence after action sequence. This is a mystery movie, and the mystery sort of unveils itself in a really sort of clever way as well. Additionally, it's just got a good look to it and is a all around kind of a cult classic. I'm sure there are a lot of people watching that have seen it. If you haven't, it's well worth checking out. Now, the 80s and mid-90s are home to some of the cheesiest sci-fi movies ever made. But if you want some mid-90s cheesy sci-fi perfection, Demolition Man is one of the best. This is Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes heading it off in the future. And the great thing about this that makes it work so well is it has a ton of fun with itself. It's a silly concept, and it's ultimately kind of a silly movie, but it's also a badass action movie. There's a great action sequence that opens up the movie. Then both of these guys are like frozen and thawed out in the future. It works in this movie, and there's a lot of fish out of the water stuff, and it's all fun. They don't know how things work, and the way that things work in the future is hilarious. Every single restaurant in the future is a Taco Bell. Toilet paper doesn't exist, but there are clamshells next to the toilet. All sorts of just fun jokes. And then some pretty badass sci-fi action stuff as well. Cool little performance from Denis Leary. Sandra Bullock has a pretty hefty role in this one, and she's great as well. If you've never bothered to watch this one, and again, you are wanting 90s cheesy sci-fi perfection, Demolition Man is where it's at. All right, and then my next pick was also sort of a box office hit, at least for a little bit, but I know time has forgotten it, and odds are, if you've seen it, you have forgotten a lot of this movie, and this movie is way cooler than it gets credit for, and I hate that there was never a sequel to Wanted. This stars Angelina Jolie and James McAvoy as these assassins who have sort of supernatural abilities. Now, it's science fiction in the sense that you can't curve bullets. There's weird sort of sci-fi like guns and technology and things in this movie, but no real supernatural powers to speak of or anything. In fact, this one barely edges into sci-fi, but because a lot of the scientific elements, if you will, are fictional and a little over the top, like, you know, people's ability to jump really far and things like that, it definitely classifies as sci-fi. But man, is this a beautiful movie. I mean, just some of the visuals you get out of this alone, even if the story was absolute garbage, it would be well worth watching. And the story's not absolute garbage. Is it a masterpiece? No, but it's a lot of fun, and this movie is the reason people go to the movie theater to see a spectacle like this, and I think Wanted was one of the better spectacles for the year that it came out, and for whatever reason, I expected this to be a hit, and it wasn't. I still love it though. I love the style and the setup and the characters. I really dig it. For sort of a mediocre movie, I like this one a lot more than I probably should. If you haven't seen it or it's been a while, definitely go back and check this one out. And then my number one pick is one of the newest movies on this list time-wise, but it's also the freshest movie in terms of the way it was filmed and the style and the concept and all of that. And that is Sorry to Bother You. This is about a telemarketer who sort of works his way up through the ranks by having a quote-unquote white voice. There's a weird gimmick with the movie that works so well. Here's a sample of what it looks like.
You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
My white voice?
Like this young blood.
Hey, Mr. Kramer. This is Langston from Regal View.
And that gimmick carries on through the entire movie. And no, that's not the sci-fi element. In fact, The fact that there is a sci-fi element to this at all is a little bit of a spoiler, but if you haven't watched this movie by now, you probably weren't going to anyway, so there's a secret little sci-fi thing that is bonkers. It's bananas, yet somehow the funky flavor of this movie makes it work, and I dug it. There's a lot of stuff going on in this one, but it's very clever and interesting. That's the main thing. There are plenty of movies that are familiar and seem like you're sort of watching something that you know you're gonna like. This one is a little bit of a risk because it's so weird, yet that's what is good about it. It's different. If you ever complain about there not being anything new and interesting released from Hollywood, Sorry to Bother You is a great example of something new and different that come out that people just did not talk about that much. Check it out when you get a chance. I hope you enjoy some of the picks off of this list. Let me know in the comments below which movies from the list you most look forward to watching, and also help me thank the Patreon supporters. They are keeping the lights on, quite literally. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there is a link in the description below. Go check that out, or choose to become a channel member. I just did a full review on The Devil All the Time, as well as some other Netflix movies like I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Those are on the channel right now for channel members. There's a link to that below as well. Just another great way to support the channel. Or buying something from one of our sponsors is another great way to support the channel. However you choose to give your support, it is greatly appreciated. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this sci-fi episode, and you will see me on the next one.